How's it going, everyone? Welcome to Ginny Arts. I'm Ginny, and today we're going to learn how to draw a realistic eagle step by step. For this video, I decided to do something completely new to me, and that is using the grid method. The grid method is basically when you take a picture and draw a grid on it, then copy the exact same grid onto the paper and try to trace the outlines of the image and maybe even shade as shown in the photo. The grid is basically a guide so you would know the proportions and the tones that are in the exact area of the image. The grid needs to be drawn really lightly so that there wouldn't be any troubles trying to erase it. And as you can see in the video, my grid is barely visible, and what I'm doing here is just following the guidelines of my reference photo and just trying to get all the outline as accurate as possible. Towards the end, I got tired of following the grid and decided to freehand a little bit, but I didn't allow myself to experiment as much and try to make it as close to the picture as possible. By the way, the reference photo was taken from Pinterest, so I will put the link to the photo in the description, and if you want to follow this tutorial, just save the photo, put a black and white filter on it, draw a grid, and you're good to go. This may seem like a lot of effort, but trust me, it's worth it. After I have the outline done, I like to start off with the eye because it's the most simple part of the animal. What I do is take an 8B pencil and color the pupil really darkly, leaving a tiny highlight as shown in the reference picture. After that, I take the same pencil and trace the iris of the eye. When that's done, I shade the top of the iris and leave a white highlight on the bottom of the eye. Once all the graphite is on the paper, take a blending tool or a tissue or whatever you're using and just smoothen everything out. Then take a kneaded eraser and just tap it onto the highlights to make them pop a little bit more. In the end, what I'm doing is giving a little bit more texture by adding tiny dots and just going over this whole thing with a blending tool. Repeat this process until you feel like the eye you've drawn looks similar or exactly like the picture, and make sure that the outline of the eye is just dark enough. The darkness makes the eye pop and look more realistic, so don't be afraid to press your pencil a little bit more. After I'm done with the eye, I take a 4B pencil and just start going towards the beak. There's not much texture there because it's still quite a dark area. So what I do is just add some graphite to the paper and smear it with a blending tool. After I have all that, I still like to work around the eye. What I do is add a really dark line above it to show where the curves are. Then, I go under the eye, and as you can see in the video, I just put a little bit of graphite underneath, leaving a small highlighted area in between. Then, I go over everything with a blending tool and just start smearing the graphite around. This makes everything seem a bit more smoother and more like the picture. After I have all of that done, I start moving even closer towards the beak itself. And to achieve the texture that is needed here, I just do tiny dots, smoothen everything out with a blending tool, then take a mono zero eraser or a pencil eraser, or what I'm using here is an electric eraser, and dot the area that you just blended. Then repeat the whole process until you have the finished texture. On the areas that are a bit darker, just repeat the same process 2 or 3 more times. Got to hit record while shading the area around the nostril, but basically what I did was focused on the darkest areas of it and blended everything out towards the left side. Then for the top of the beak, I started drawing a really dark line. This is just to make the whole drawing pop a bit more. For the rest of the nasal area, I just used the blending stump to put all the shadows in. Then I took a 4B pencil for the lines just to give the nasal area an overall shape. Then I just took an electric eraser and added all the highlights. For the rest of the beak, I basically did the same thing, just added a really dark line above and went over it with the blending tool a couple of times. And for the highlights, I used an eraser to go over and make the beak look a bit more scratched up. This gives it a bit more of a realistic feel. For the part where the upper part of the beak meets the lower part of the beak, I just added a really dark line and a bit of shadow that's casted from the top part of the beak. After that, I proceeded to use the same technique to shade the mouth. Now for the top of the head, I did a similar thing that I did with the beak. I just drew a really dark line above it and went over it with a blending tool. And as for the texture, I continued to do the same thing as I did for the area above the eye. All I did was add some lines of light gray going towards the back of the head and went over them with a blending tool. And then went over everything with an electric eraser and repeated the process until I got the desired result. Then I moved on to drawing the feathery texture beneath the eye. Make sure that everything is going to one, meaning that the tiny dotted texture is blending in with the streaky texture. And what that basically makes is a very pretty transition where both textures just blend in together seamlessly. Now for the chin area, all I did was copy the technique that I used to achieve the texture under the eye. Got to the black feather part, the reference photo was not clear enough and I just didn't want to leave it as a black blob. So I improvised. I drew some triangles as feathers, and as you can see in the video, what I did was just color them by drawing lines that are going down, making sure to follow the flow of the feathers itself, and I just went over everything with a blending tool and eraser. Then just repeated the process until I got the desired texture. Now here I used a black coloring pencil just because it gets the job done a bit better. And for the darkest areas I used a 12B pencil, but I'm aware that this is probably not as easy to find, so if you can use an 8B pencil or a 9B pencil or just a regular black coloring pencil, it will get the job done. Don't forget to erase the grid. And yeah, that's how you draw a realistic eagle. If you enjoyed this video, make sure to leave a like, subscribe, hit the notification bell so you don't miss any new videos, and I'll see you soon.